The sun has gone down at Hangman's Hill, and the ghost at Misery Corner isn't walking tonight. So, welcome to the Weird Tales Radio Show, your weekly fix of ghost stories, urban myths, witchcraft, magic, and folklore. And now, here's your host, writer, award-winning journalist, best-selling author, and sometime werewolf hunter, Charles Christian.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Weird Tales Radio Show with me, Charles Christian. Now we have another great interview coming up for you in a moment, but before we get there, let me just plug a webinar. It's a webinar I'm involved with and it's taking place this coming Saturday, that's the 23rd of January, at 1pm Eastern or 6pm UK time. And it's available to members of the Ancient Origins Premium Group. The topic is old school ghost hunting versus modern paranormal research, and it will involve me comparing and contrasting the alternative approaches, as well as asking whether good research is far more valuable than lots of shiny tech gadgetry. You can find out more details at www.ancient-origins.net. Right, time for our interview. And this week we are heading into the realms of geek and popular culture as we talk to film critic, author and blogger Marshall Julius about science fiction and fantasy movie franchises, including Star Wars, Star Trek and the Marvel Avengers series, and ask, how long can these franchises keep on being extended before we risk killing the golden goose? Marshall Julius, who has been a guest on Weird Tales before, is the author of the book Vintage Geek and describes himself as a veteran nerd with unbound enthusiasm and a collector of colourful plastic things. Not much change since last time we spoke, still in lockdown.
Yeah, I know, it's amazing, isn't it?
Still not going anywhere, still not doing anything.
No. But just a bit older and fatter, and I haven't bothered shaving for months. So, yeah. I think it's going to take 6 months for me to get leaving the house ready, to be honest, after all this nonsense.
Yes. Have I got my trousers on?
Yeah, that's true. I still only bother dressing the top half for most of the day.
Well, exactly. If you're doing Zoom, you only see the top half of you. So what do you need the rest for?
Actually, to be honest, just the top quarter. You know,
Yes.
if you play it well, it's just crop tops and pajamas for me.
Yes. One of those things you can get for cardigans that are like a polo neck sweater, but it's just the polo neck bit and a sort of V bit of wool that you tuck in.
Exactly. I'm just Jabba the Hutt from the nipples down, basically.
Well, there's an image we can probably do without. Anyway, Marshall, good to speak to you again.
You too.
Bringing up Jabba the Hutt there, the topic we're talking about is going to be, I suppose, sequels and the franchises and the fact that Star Wars, Star Trek, the Marvel universe, they are just endless new movies and sequels and prequels coming out. And whether or not it's viable, how far can you go with them and take it on from there? I mean, what struck me was seeing the Mandalorian, which was infinitely, in my view, infinitely better than the last three Star Wars movies and probably the original prequels.
For sure, better than the prequels. I think that The Mandalorian is the first great Star Wars since Return of the Jedi, since the original theatrical release of Return of the Jedi. I think that a lot of people say, well, a lot of the Star Wars world building between Return of the Jedi and The Mandalorian is what gave a lot of the meat to The Mandalorian. A lot of these characters that have popped up because they were created by Dave Filoni, who runs the show and has also been very involved in the animation and creating various characters. And I can see that. But I think that as far as I'm concerned, all of that previous stuff was just prep and research, and that The Mandalorian is the real deal. And the thing that I like about the show is that it's proper old school Star Wars, isn't it? It is. You know, Baby Yoda's a puppet, and it has that feel of it. It's kind of the world feels right. It looks right. It's kind of grimy and beaten up. It doesn't look all CG and just it's exactly what it should be. There's nothing wrong with using computer generated graphics, so long as you use them to enhance the project that you're making instead of just create everything about it in it, which is what the prequels did. But honestly, my problems with the prequels, the graphics were the least of it. I also thought that the characters were terrible. I thought that the dialogue, the script was dreadful. The storytelling, I mean, everything was just so dreckish in the prequels. And when J.J. Abrams came out with The Force Awakens, it felt like a sort of a copy of Star Wars, but at least felt like it was on the right track, and it felt like, oh, this is promising. This feels like we're going to have a good, fun trilogy, and then they can build on it with the second one, and they can, drive it home with the third one, and we'll have a good final trilogy. But they screwed it up. I just think they screwed it up horribly, and we're not here to talk about that. No, thank God. But basically, and it felt like. Me and a lot of old school Star Wars fans I never turned my back on Star Wars, but I was never particularly interested in anything that was produced post Jedi. I like Rogue. I like some of the movies.
Yeah, Rogue One. I mean, I watched that again recently, and I also watched for the first time the Han Solo single movie. And Rogue One again was infinitely superior because
for sure, yeah. I think that's the only really, really good thing in between Jedi and The Mandalorian. I'll give them their due. And what I especially liked about it, well, one of the things I really liked about it was that it was just one film. It was like, oh, thank God, it's just one film. They kill off the characters at the end. It's not going to be everybody's going to turn out to be related, and it's not soapy. It was a good story. And I loved Darth Vader's appearance at the end. I thought that was fantastic, the way that he just fought his way through the rebel soldiers. I love that. I love the way that it ended. I thought that the Leia effects were dreadful. Yeah. Dreadful. I mean, I think every time they do that, it's terrible. I didn't think that was good when they, brought Moff Tarkin back from the dead. Just get an actor who looks a bit like him, but a good actor to do it. Yeah. It doesn't have to be Peter Cushing. You can have other characters play. You can have other actors play the same role. If we can have more than one Kirk, you can have, God knows how many Doctor Who's. Why can't you have other actors playing Star Wars characters? Because I think it would have just been. If they wanted to be referential and respectful, they should have just got Carrie Fisher's kid to play her in that one scene. Just give her a Leia do and let her go on from there. We would know what it was, and I think it would mean infinitely more. Of course, they did it again in The Mandalorian, didn't they? Yeah. Even though everybody thinks that Sebastian Stan, well known as the Winter Soldier in the MCU, but absolute dead spit of Mark Hamill. If they could have got him to play Luke Skywalker, how far superior that would have been to having a CG Luke come in, because it just pulls you out of it, doesn't it? It doesn't quite fit.
I found myself sort of missing the plot because I was staring at them and thinking, not quite right. What's going on here? And
I don't know what's wrong. I can't put my finger on. It just looks lifeless.
Yeah.
It just doesn't have that spark. And the thing is, if you look at each individual frame, it looks, spot on. But it's just not right. It's like it's like Invasion of the Body Snatchers. It's like you're looking at it and you can just tell it's got no soul. It's really strange. and look, I love Mark Hamill. He is a great guy and a fantastic nerd, and on a personal level, contributing question for my book, and he's just been wonderful. And if he wants to play the character he immortalized, then I'm not going to get in the way of that.
Yeah.
But that said, I think that the technology still hasn't reached the point when that can be done properly.
Moving on from Star Wars, we've also got Star Trek, which is now playing on more channels than I can keep track of, and in more formats of it. But again, we had on Amazon, we had the Picard series, which was old characters, but doing new stuff rather than just reprising the same roles. What's your view on the Star Trek multiverse?
Well, I think that to go back to what you asked before about can these things run out of steam? Or I think that with Star Wars and Star Trek, I think universes were created. And I think that there is definitely room for an infinite number of Star Wars stories, and with Star Trek, just as much. It was based. Star Wars, the whole of the Star Wars universe is based on the success of 3 films. Star Trek was based on the success of 78 episodes.
Yes.
So it began as an episodic series, which had, just one great story after another. They introduced all these different strands. It made perfect sense for them to bring it back. And when they brought it back with the Next Generation, they knocked it out of the park again. And then when they did it again with Deep Space Nine and Voyager, and spreading further and further out into, the universe, and getting it deeper into different alien cultures, and these worlds, the Star Wars and I think Star Trek even more so, have created such enormous galaxies of worlds and characters and plots that I don't see any reason why they just can't go on and on. The trick is to keep it fresh. And not just keep remaking the same old thing. I mean, people get upset, didn't they, about Picard and Discovery on Netflix when shows come along that they do something different. It's like, how dare you have representational characters in it? How dare you make a Star Trek in which people swear or I don't know, go to the toilet or aren't really great at everything, or aren't. I mean, the thing that I liked about Star Trek is that originally was that it's so shiny and positive, and everybody is so sort of perfect. For anybody to display imperfect behavior in Star Trek, they have to get some sort of space virus, and that's always cured by the end. They were always finding a way for Spock to show emotions and for people to misbehave, but it was always because some plant blew its spores in their faces or something. That sounds a little bit rude, but
yes.
But I think that you have to move on and develop, because as much as fans want their entertainment to remain sort of the same, it will just stagnate and die if you do that. So you have to find a way to mix the old with the new, and that is why I think Mandalorian works so well. And why I'm always up for new Star Trek. I think that sometimes Discovery overplays the representation card. They're a little bit, it's like every character is something or other, or there's nothing wrong with that, but I think that they're just a little bit so eager to be to be worthy to tick all the boxes. That sometimes it's a little bit distracting. Is all I'm saying. But I think that maybe in order to move forwards in this modern world of ours, maybe you just need to have a show that's a little bit obvious about it, so that in a kind of plastic surgery way, you have to break the nose in order to kind of reset it. So maybe Discovery is the sort of blunt nose-breaking instrument that Star Trek needed in order to reset it to a kind of a more attractive future. But I love Picard. I think both Discovery and Picard took a little bit of getting into. They took a little bit of, getting used to the kind of the speed and the vibe of it. And I'm not sure I kind of love either of them the same way that I loved Star Trek Next Generation but at their best, I absolutely do. Yeah. And so often they hit episodes when it's just like they brought Harry Mudd in for an episode of Discovery. The Harry Mudd who's the only recurring guest character in the original show, and it was sort of a time travel thing, or it was a time loop thing. And I love time loop stories where they're stuck and they keep replaying the same thing over and over. And there was an episode, I think, from the first season of Discovery, and when I watched that, and they got it so right, and I just absolutely loved it. You just have that feeling of falling in love with the TV show, and I thought, there's going to be ups and downs in Discovery, but I actually think I love it now. And and then like the last episode, they had Lorca, Jason Isaacs' character, blow something up, and he turned his back on the screen while it was blowing up, and we had a classic walking away from the explosion scene, just like classic 1980s action films. Yes. And that was also a significant moment for me, and it keeps delivering on those moments. I really enjoyed the latest season of Star Trek Discovery, which goes to the far future, further than any Star Trek has gone before, which is sort of its remit, isn't it? That's what it's supposed to do. So I'm enjoying it very much. And Picard, look, I mean, who wouldn't want to see all of Patrick Stewart and the team get back together, everybody having little cameos? There was that episode, have you seen it all the way through?
I have seen that, yes.
There was that episode where he goes to the planet where Troy and Riker have gotten married and are living basically just like, like it's the 1940s, basically. Yes. They've got lovely woodland kind of a cottage, and he's, barbecuing and stuff. But actually, if you look at it, they just spend the whole time hugging. There's so much hugging in that episode, and it's because the characters love each other, and the actors love each other, and you could just feel it. I mean, it was just that everybody has just so much affection for each other. So I don't know what new people coming to the show would think of it. All these old duffers just constantly hugging each other and looking at each other with love. It's like, what the hell's going on? But it was, for me, it was like I was right there with them. I was giving them my mental hugs. I would have just gotten in on those hugs in a heartbeat if I could have. So, I didn't begrudge them that. I was very happy to see it. And it was fun to watch, Picard in a sort of slightly more sort of not modern world, because obviously the world's always been of the future, but with a more modern sensibility without the constraints of network television, being able to swear occasionally or misbehave or, speak his thoughts. And he was never really an action guy. They always had other people to do most of the action anyway. So it doesn't matter that he's old either. I think it worked very well. And here I will stop blathering on about Picard and let you get a word in. I'm sorry.
I was going to ask you, what do you think of the movie continuations? We had the reboot.
Yes.
And it seemed to rather lose its way quite quickly.
Yeah. I mean, I really loved the first one. I thought the first one was great. I loved the way that they sort of changed the timeline so that it was sort of which meant that they established a Star Trek world in which they weren't constrained to fit in with the rest of Star Trek. They could go their own way, and I think that was just genius. I loved how they did that. I loved that that they managed to create a Star Trek in which you could have Leonard Nimoy turn up as Spock, but they had their own equally legitimate Spock. And I thought that the adventure, the first film, was exciting and heartfelt and really captured what Star Trek is and should be, and I loved the first one, but the second one was a disappointment, and the third one sucked eggs. So it's like they really lost the plot. I think a lot of people were a little bit offended that J.J. Abrams said, I wasn't really a Star Trek fan. I was always a Star Wars fan. I always wanted to make Star Wars, but he got a chance to make Star Trek first. So he approached it with a little sort of half-heartedness, I think a few people felt. I don't think that necessarily showed in the first one, though. But the series did sort of run out of steam when he left to go off and make Star Wars movies instead.
Yes.
But then he left the Star Wars movies too, and what happened there? I think if you're going to go in, you should just be all in and stick with it. If you do the first film right, you should just stay. Obviously, that's not what they did with Star Wars. You know, Lucas did the first one, then he got other directors in to do the others, and I think they did a great job. But that doesn't always work. You know, sometimes you get somebody in, like for the second of the Star Wars sequels, and they have their own ideas, and you just let them run with it. But it turns out that their ideas were kind of, in my opinion, insane and toxic and ruins of the series.
Yeah. Now, the other big universe going on is Marvel. Now, that, I confess, is not one I've followed that closely. I love the Guardians of the Galaxy, but some of the other ones have left me cold, and I certainly haven't seen all of them. Now, if you were advising someone for the first time to get into it, where would you start?
Well, I would probably say go back in time and spend your childhood reading Marvel comics and then watch all the dreck that we were forced to watch as children, all the Nicholas Hammond Spider-Man shows in the 1970s, the fondly remembered but actually quite dreary Incredible Hulk show with Lou Ferrigno, which, would have a few decent minutes, but was basically just quite slow and dated even at the time. It felt like, we watched it, but I can't say I was ever a big fan of it. And maybe, and then watch Iron Man.
Right.
And tell me that, Jon Favreau's Iron Man with, Robert Downey Jr. as the star isn't the body and the soul and the heart of the character of the comics and of Marvel. And after years of wanting to see comic book stories realistically rendered on screen, that if you can then say, I'm not that bothered about Marvel, it's like then you just didn't grow up loving those sorts of things, and that is totally fine. But me as a kid, I was desperate to see proper Spider-Man on screen. I was really happy. I really wanted to see proper big Hulk, not just a bloke painted green. I wanted to see these cosmic adventures imagined by Kirby, the biggest, and Ditko, the great Marvel artists who would lay out these incredible worlds for us. But then we saw such lackluster versions of them on the screen because they just weren't able to realize them until relatively recently. And so I think the things started to get better with things like the Blade movies and Sam Raimi's Spider-Man movies. And I started to feel like, actually, they're getting it right. Because another thing that comic book movies often did wrong was that they were a little bit embarrassed of the subject matter. It was a little bit childish. They thought it was a little bit childish. They didn't really get it. I think the first comic book movie that understood the mythic quality of its source material and that paid due respect to it and treated it with the same respect that, say, Mario Puzo did the Mafia with The Godfather was Superman the movie, also written by Mario Puzo. So this guy knew how to respect his institutions and how to give them a mythic quality. And I loved Superman.
That was the Christopher Reeve.
It was the Christopher Reeve one. I mean,
early ones, yes, the first one.
70s, but that was along with that was as meaningful to me when I was a kid as Star Wars was. But the thing with Superman was that Superman 2 was fun, but after that there were 10 years or more of superhero and comic book films that just didn't quite get it the same way that Superman did. They were all a little bit they had to be a bit jokey, they had to be a bit winky, because they just didn't really understand how to make comic book movies without being that were straight but funny, but the kind of that weren't embarrassed of themselves. That could have guys in tights and okay, appreciate that maybe that is a crazy thing to do, but at the same time, kind of own it.
Yeah.
And embrace the fun of it. And I think that's what Marvel did from the first moment that Marvel was on the screen with, the MCU.
Yeah.
As soon as Marvel properly started taking charge of its destiny, and Jon Favreau is key to this. Because he made the Mandalorian as well. So here's a guy who grew up loving Star Wars, grew up loving Superman the movie and superheroes, and was in a position to make what he felt should be the perfect superhero film, which he did. And I think that we owe so much to Jon Favreau. I think he is a George Lucas for the modern era. And I think that, he needs to, all the awards need to be sent to his house. So for me, I would say that if you can't go back in time and become a Marvel fan your whole life, I would just start with Iron Man, and I would watch them in order release, because you don't want to watch them Iron Man 1, 2, 3, Captain America 1, 2, 3, because the order that they're made is the order of the story that's being told, and as they wear on, they become more intricate, they become more guest stars, more referential to other episodes, to other films, and so you really need to kind of watch them in order. So that's how I have them displayed in Blu-ray on my shelves in release order rather than series order, and that is once a year or so is the order in which I rewatch them, because although some of them are weaker than others for sure, I love them all. Every time I watch even the weaker ones, the Thor 2 or some Iron Man 2, I can forgive them their flaws to a point. I take off my film critic hat and I put on my comic book, geek hat, which is a bigger hat, to be honest. And I just I remember what it was like to watch all those shitty superhero shows and films in the 70s, things that they didn't get it, and even if they did get it, they couldn't make it properly anyway, with the exception of Superman. There were just so many misfires. And I waited so long for superhero movies to get it right. I'm so grateful to the MCU. And one of the worst things about the pandemic, and it's just sound ridiculous, is that we were robbed of a whole year of Marvel movies. But I'm excited that we're going to catch up this year. We're going to have the Marvel movies from last year that we missed, plus Disney Plus are doing the Scarlet Witch and WandaVision series, which is coming out very shortly, and then after that the Winter Soldier, and there's just going to be a whole ton of superhero content, and hopefully they won't outstay their welcome. They won't ruin it. They probably will, Charles. They probably will. But even then, I'd rather they keep doing it until it's just a beaten dead donkey in the ground, and then they stopped before that. I just want to get as much superhero goodness in my life before they move on to the next genre. And superhero things, it won't last forever. There'll always be superhero films, but not every big blockbuster will be a superhero film. In the 50s it was all westerns, in the 80s it was all action movies. For the last 10 years or so it's all been superhero movies, but they'll find something else, and superhero movies will become secondary.
Yeah.
And that's fine too.
Yeah.
You know, it is what it is. And I say bring it all on. And if it's good, I'll celebrate it. If it's bad, I'll also I'll say so and waggle a finger the way I do all the DC Universe films, which are mostly terrible.
You're listening to the Weird Tales radio show with Charles Christian.
What do you think is the issue then with DC compared with Marvel? Because, you know, from the comics point of view, and it's a long time since I bought and looked at either of their ranges, but they're broadly similar, aren't they?
I suppose that DC likes to think of itself as having a slightly different vibe. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
I think that they think of themselves as a bit more cosmic or serious. Or I'm not sure. I think that you're right. Honestly, I think that I think that you're right. I think that each individual character has their own world, and they're not. You know, I grew up loving Spider-Man. I grew up loving Batman. For me, it was never a competition between DC and Marvel. I was happy to read both. I didn't like everything they both did, but I was, you know, I love Spider-Man. I was always most obsessed with Batman. Growing up, you know, especially in my 20s, I was like really into Batman and just have a huge collection of graphic novels. And so here's my theory about why the DC universe doesn't work. And I know that, you know, the Christopher Nolan's Batman Begins was great. I also like Man of Steel. I like the first Superman film with Henry Cavill. But why I think that most of the others don't work, especially things like Suicide Squad and the Wonder Womans, and why my heart sinks when they talk about how there's going to be a new Zack Snyder take on the Justice League film that's going to be like 3 hours long or something. And this is because when you're making a rival thing, you have to make it different to your rival, right? You can't just copy them, right? So as far as I'm concerned, Marvel, the MCU, the Marvel movie universe, they have created the perfect recipe for superhero films that tread the perfect balance between campiness and taking them seriously. They have exactly the right balance between action and superhero drama and the right pitch of humor and thrills. And I just think it's just like the absolute perfect recipe. Every ingredient is just, you know, it's not a pinch out of place. And so DC, obviously, they feel they have to do it differently because they want their own identity. And the trouble is, I think that anything different to that is going to be inferior. And so they are, by trying to do something different, they are doomed to making something that's not as good. And they've really embraced making something that's not as good. They are there's just something lacking in every respect in most of those movies. They take themselves so seriously. I don't even like the sort of look or the color scheme of them. They feel awkward, and the way that they intertwine, it just doesn't work. I'm very unimpressed by the DC universe, which is, you know, a shame, because all the more superhero films, the merrier, as far as I'm concerned. But they're just not really working. Even the ones that are perfectly watchable and relatively successful, things like Aquaman and stuff, it's just, it just feels like, it's just another blockbuster now. There doesn't feel anything special about it. And I think the best of the Marvel movies are very special. I mean, I could watch Iron Man. I could watch Captain America and Captain America, the Winter Soldier. I could watch some of those films over and over and over again in the same way that you could just listen to your favorite song. Yeah. Without ever tiring of them, because they just put you in the perfect mood. They just set everything up, and it's just a pleasure, like being wrapped in a big geeky blanket. And I don't think that DC have begun to emulate that. You know, fine, go find your own style. Yeah. But just accept that unless you're going to copy Marvel, it's not going to be as good.
Yeah, because I mean, the general view is the much hyped and awaited Wonder Woman 1984. You know, the reviews are basically meh.
I think that the trouble with that film specifically, and I really like the opening scene on Themyscira when it's the young Wonder Woman, and I thought that actress, actually, I would have rather seen a whole film with young Diana than the modern Wonder Woman, because Gal Gadot is just a terrible actress. You know, she looks amazing, and look, she was in the Israeli army. She could kick my ass, and I don't doubt it. She's absolutely gorgeous looking, and she nails the action stuff, but she is not a good actress. She's just not. There's something stilted about her delivery, and I just find her incredibly unconvincing. And on top of which, she's just given the most terrible dialogue. I mean, I don't know if you've seen the film, but the last 30 minutes is just a hell show. And it ends up with, you know, a bunch, just like the first one, a bunch of CG heroes fighting CG villains, and there's a scene in which she basically talks to the world and tries to appeal to their better nature, tries to appeal to the people of the world to give up easy success and riches in order for the greater good. And it's like, I'm sorry, Wonder Woman, but you know that. Have you seen, people won't even put their bloody masks on. So it's like, I think that a film in which relies on everyone to do the right thing, I think maybe if they said about half the world to do the right thing, that would be good. But anything which, demands good behavior from everybody is doomed to fail. And so I thought it's so ridiculous. I think it was too long, and the villain took too long to become fully villain out. And I just had, it was okay, but I think at a time when we want to say to people, look, we know it's not safe to go to the cinema right now, but eventually it will be. And as used as you are to sitting on your butts on the sofa, remember, it was actually quite fun to spend a little bit more, to go out, to have a shared experience at the cinema, to laugh along with a few hundred other people at the same joke, to have this community vibe, to go and sit with a big bucket of popcorn on your lap, to see something on a giant screen with amazing surround sound, and remember that experience, because it was wonderful, and that is something that we've lost now, and it's something that you mustn't get used to being without, and it's something that we need to go back to. But we need to be reminded of that experience by luring us in with a proper bait. And films like Tenet, which was just unbelievably terrible as far as I'm concerned, and Wonder Woman, which was pretty mediocre, is not the appropriate bait. Yeah. If you're telling people we should get you back into the cinema to see these great big wonderful adventures, then I think you need to release some great big wonderful adventures. Yeah. Because if you just release a bunch of, tepid turkeys, then why would anybody bother? Yeah. So I think that's the key to getting people to go back to the cinema is, yes, beat the coronavirus, and secondly, stop making so many films. Make things that people want to go and see. Yeah.
Talking of getting blockbusters and getting you back into the cinemas, it looks like the James Bond movie's being pushed back for a third time, doesn't it?
Yeah. If I'd been looking forward to it though, even from the first time it was released, then I would probably be more frustrated. But I really liked Skyfall. I did not like Spectre. I thought Spectre was, I think, as great a leap forward as Skyfall was for the Daniel Craig series. I thought Spectre was an equal leap back. And I'm just not interested in this new one. I'll go and see it, but I am. Look, I look to the future. I love Marvel movies. I love all sorts of films. But when it comes to James Bond, I'm just an old fart, Charles, and I don't, as far as I'm concerned, James Bond should have ended with The Spy Who Loved Me.
Yeah.
And for a lot of people, that was probably going too far. A lot of people would have probably thought it should have ended at Sean Connery's, when he did it. But I also love Roger Moore. I grew up with Roger Moore, and I think that a great thing about Roger Moore was that it was like he was the flip side of the Connery coin when it came to Bond. And Connery had his way of playing it, and Roger Moore had his way of playing it. They did the more serious, darker spy sort of antics of Connery. They did the kind of jokey, shag about kind of Austin Powers of Roger Moore's side. And I enjoyed both of those sides. But then everything after that was everybody was either a little bit more Connery or a little bit more Moore, and they were sort of more. They were just, it was like a pinch of this, a pinch of that, and I never felt like anybody else really owned the role the way that those two did. And I think that trying to modernize them was a mistake. I think that all of the Bond films should be set during the Cold War, honestly, because I don't see why they have to be contemporary. I think that they should, after Daniel Craig goes, what they need to do is I would like to see them just start a new if they are going to do it, and I think that they should just stop. But if they are going to do it, I would rather they make a series of Bond films set in the past.
Yeah. Yeah.
And because that would just be so much more fun. You could have the kind of 60s and so build up to the 70s where things become a bit more sort of Kingsman era with people trying to take over the world with crazy big plots to destroy mankind or whatever. But I think don't go beyond like the 70s. I think set a series of films in those eras and make the Russians the main villains. And because it's like, why the hell not? I mean, the Russians are still influencing the world for the worse in real life. I mean, at least I feel that with Putin and with Trump and his puppet, and I don't think that it's. I still think it's timely. And the Cold War was such an interesting time to be a spy, I think. Yeah, and that was the time to do it. So I think that Bond films should be set in the past, and that they don't have to be contemporary. And I think that they should be fiercely of their time as well, without trying to have a modern character in the 60s. And with all the good and bad that means, why does James Bond have to be a proper gentleman anymore? Why does he have to be like this? Does he have to be universally beloved? Can he not have flaws? Can he not be a sexist pig? It's like he kills people, for God's sake.
Yeah, that's his job title.
He's a killer. Yeah. So it's like he's probably not somebody you're going to want to bring home to your mum. He's got some serious issues, and so I say let Bond be Bond. Don't reinvent him. Don't make him something that he's not, and let him live in the 60s in a cage in the 60s where he belongs. Stop trying to bring him up to date. So either stop it entirely or reboot the thing and set it in the past. But honestly, I'm quite happy with my Sean Connery and Roger Moore box sets. I don't need more Bond.
Yeah.
I don't need more Bond.
Yeah. Talking of another movie that's making a return, that I've lost track on whether it's actually coming out as a movie now or as a TV series, and that's Dune.
Oh yeah, well that's Denis Villeneuve, isn't it? He's making a movie. He's made it, and it will be a while before it comes out. I'm not sure what the release date of that is, but I'm not a massive fan of that sort of that sort of sci-fi. I've got friends who are. I was just always too lazy a reader to read the Dune books, and as much as I sort of appreciated the visuals and the scope of the David Lynch version in the 80s, it was all quite baffling. And I expect this new film to be inscrutable and a bit up itself, just like that's what I expect from every version of Dune that I've seen has been that way. I will watch it if I have the chance. I will be very happy to go and see it on the big screen, and I will try and be open-minded. Though I swear, every time I see what's his name, the very little lad who's in it. God, who's got the peach from Call Me by Your Name. Can I say?
You just have done, yeah.
Yeah. He's very. I'm not a great fan of his, and I'm not sure I want to stare at his face. Timothy Chalamet. Yeah, there we go. I'm not sure I want to stare at his face for 3 hours, but let's see.
Yeah. Yes, because I mean that is one of those movies that the books, as you say, are epic and confused and get more and more obscure as they go on. And the original David Lynch version, there are huge cuts in it where bits have just been removed for time and characters brought in that sort of never quite fills out. And I think everybody still remembers the scene as Stinger's the bad guy in his underpants doing the fighting.
Oh, yeah, it's funny. As soon as you started that sentence, I knew you were going to say that. It's like, how could anybody forget Stinger's underpants? It was a spectacle, and it was, what do you expect when you ask David Lynch to direct a studio science fiction movie? I think if anybody expected anything less crazy, then they'd never seen Eraserhead or any of his other films, really.
Yes. Yeah, you do wonder whether they looked at his CV when they booked him.
Well, I know that Mel Brooks went to a screening of Eraserhead when he was trying to decide, because his company Brooks Films produced The Elephant Man,
right? And
it's actually it was actually up to him to pick the director, and I think that actually The Elephant Man is probably one of his more mainstream films, David Lynch.
Yeah.
And he was waiting for Mel Brooks to come out of the screening with a decision. He hadn't seen Eraserhead. So, I think that he probably thought that he wasn't going to get the gig because Eraserhead is batshit crazy.
Yeah.
And, really just one of the maddest things I've ever seen. It just dwarfs Twin Peaks in terms of madness. I think even Twin Peaks seems relatively normal compared to Eraserhead. And so Mel Brooks comes out of the screening and walks up to David Lynch, and as the story goes, something like embraces him or kisses him or something and says, "You're a madman. I love you. Direct the film." And So Mel Brooks certainly saw something, and so maybe other production companies back then also felt like he could be reined in and to produce something special. I think The Elephant Man is a more successful film than his Dune, but there you go. I can't say I'm particularly bothered about Dune one way or the other. Yeah. I'm more excited to see, more Mandalorian and more of the things that other TV shows that I'm enjoying. I actually more excited to see a new series of The Umbrella Academy and on Netflix, and that worries me because, like I said, I want everybody to go back to the cinema, and I think everybody's mass fallen in love with television again because television is what has saved us from all losing our minds during the pandemic, and it worries me that actually I'm more excited about the TV shows than the films, and that I think comes back to me saying that films have to really pull their trousers up and be all that they can be in order to get people to go back to the cinema, because that's really what I want to do. Just need everybody to fall in love with the cinema again.
And talking of other things on the near horizon, what other shows or movie releases, as and when they ever appear, have we got to look forward to over the first half of this year?
See, that's the question, isn't it, Charles? I just don't. I can't see cinemas reopening for for a while longer. I don't think that we're going to. I just can't see it. That we're all going to have to get our shots.
Yeah.
Before anything can realistically open. I think that all the cinemas closed. They reopened again at great expense. They closed again. I imagine it costs quite a lot to gear up again and then close again. And I think that they're probably going to be much more cautious this time. When they open, I think they want to feel that they're going to properly reopen.
And stay open, yeah.
And stay open. And at the moment, that's clearly not the time to do it. So I don't know. I don't even want to guess when we're going to get back into the cinema. And sooner rather than later, I hope. But I'd be happy to when I finally get to go back, and I'm sure there's the new. I mean, in terms of nerdery, there's more Marvel movies to catch up with, and I suppose it will be fun to go and see a Bond film at the cinema just to hear. Because even though the films usually end up disappointing, when it opens with the gun barrel and music and that swell of the John Barry music, I'm only human. I can't help but get excited by that. And to be in a cinema again, to look around and see just, kind of a whole crowd of people watching it and enjoying it at the same time, I would really enjoy that. So I suppose my answer to you is I don't have anything individual that I'm thrilled, cannot wait to see. I just actually want the experience of going back to the cinema and enjoying a film with other people. It's the experience that I'm looking forward to more than anything else, rather than any individual film. I just need the films not to suck.
Yeah.
That is what I'm looking forward to more than any individual movie. I'm sorry if that's not really a proper answer. I'm not.
No, that's a very good answer, and of course,
but that's what I'm looking for.
Thank you ever so much, and we will be in touch again in the future.
Charles, I'm happy to chat with you any time, any day of the week. I loved it. Thank you for having me on.
Take care now. Once again, thank you to Marshall Julius. You can follow him on Twitter at Marshall Julius for all things geeky, nerdelicious and dorktastic. And that's it. It's time for me to go. But before I do, I'm signing off with some words of wisdom inspired by this week's guest, Marshall Julius, and his discussion of the Marvel Avengers movies. These lines are spoken by Hawkeye in the movie Avengers Age of Ultron. The city is flying and we're fighting an army of robots and I have a bow and arrow. None of this makes sense. A perfect quote for the strange times we're living in. None of it makes sense. Now it just remains for me to say, this is Charles Christian saying, thank you for listening in. Please join me again next time. Until then, stay well, stay weird. Goodbye.
Black Shuck, the demon dog of East Anglia, is baying at the moon, which means it's time for us to go. You've been listening to the Weird Tales radio show with Charles Christian, your weekly fix of ghost stories, urban myths, witchcraft, folklore, and the paranormal. You can keep in touch with us online at www.urbanfantasist.com, by email to urbanfantasist@icloud.com, and on Twitter @urbanfantasist. Join us again next week for another edition of the Weird Tales radio show. Goodbye.